Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Oneness Junkie podcast, hosted by me, Lydia Smith, a self-proclaimed Oneness Junkie. Oneness Junkie is a place to be inspired, encouraged, and supported. Learn from the individuals who are working to make the world a better place. Let's meet today's guest. Hi, everybody. This is Lydia. And today we have Rob Geyer with us. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Lydia.
How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with me here today on the Oneness Junkie podcast. I'd like to start off by telling the listeners how I know you or don't know you and how I brought you on as a guest today. And then we'll have you introduce yourself. Okay. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. So I have an Instagram account called Oneness Junkie, and I really feel like spirit is the guidance that gives me the direction in which I am drawn and meant to pick and select guest for the show. And I ran across Rob's account. I started looking at some of his posts, and in one of his posts, he describes wanting to share messages that help inspire others to finding their truth. And that just sounded so great to me. And I just thought, I'm going to reach out to him. It really resonated with me because anybody who's spending time, their time and talents to help others out is a fit for the Oneness Junkie conversation. So I do appreciate and thank you for being here today. So that's how we met. We met on Instagram, and like the audience, I don't know Rob very well. So I'm going to get to know Rob today along with you guys. So we're going to be asking Rob some questions and see if he has any information and insights for us. So in the beginning, could you just go ahead and give us a little background about where you came from and bring us kind of up to today to what you're focused on and what you're doing?
Sure. Thanks, Lydia. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a North Country New York boy, right along the border of Canada and in snowbelt country.
Wow.
So I've seen my share of storms and good times. My sister and I, when we were little, were able to jump out of our second story window into the snow and not get hurt. We might get lost, but not hurt. That's how much snow that we had.
Wow.
It was a great place to live and be brought up. I was there for my first 8 years, and I spent a great deal of time outdoors. I like investigating, and I'm just naturally kind of curious. So I really enjoyed being there. I had a lot of other interests and some unique things that kind of surprised me because I seem to know certain things before they were going to happen.
Really? You're talking about like at 8? How old were you when you started to realize this?
Probably 6 or 7.
Wow.
Knowing who was going to be on the phone and that sort of thing. Just little stuff. And I thought it was kind of normal, so I didn't say anything to anybody about it. I just thought everybody knew that.
Or had that gift.
Yep. And we ended up moving from Watertown to just outside of Albany, the capital. And so I had to refit within the neighborhood. And I think that, it's kind of funny to me because I know that you were interested in my writing career and when it started. I'd have to say I was about 9 or 10 years old. I remember that I was fascinated with the FBI and read a bunch of stuff about it and watched TV shows. And so my first story was the case of Shootist McRowan. And I illustrated it and everything. And it was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 pages, which was kind of long for me to spend any time writing. And I showed it probably only to about 2 people, my mother and my grandmother. And they both, they were amused by it. And I think they were just, trying to be nice to me. But that was my humble writing beginnings.
Do you remember the story a little bit? Like humor us a little bit.
I still have it. It was, the classic kind of
Who done it?
FBI chase, and this Judas McRowan trying to get away. And of course, the FBI was gonna, they nabbed him in the end. And
do you have an Irish background? How'd you get a name like McRowan?
Absolutely no idea where that came from, So it was really kind of amusing to me to have that be the beginnings of my writings. I know in high school, I spent a great deal of time writing poetry, and that lasted for a lot of years. And I guess I have my mom to thank for the fact that she really thought that it was worthwhile, because she read them, and she had worked at the College of St. Lawrence in Canton, New York. And so there was a dean up there who was in English, and she sent the whole thing to him. And
wow.
He got back to her and said that, that they're promising. Which I think is a pretty neutral word, So
which means room for improvement too.
Exactly.
That's funny. Well, that's neat. So they must have been deep for your age. Like they were that impressive. They were probably deep writings.
They felt like it to me, but of course, everything is pretty subjective when you're talking about your own work. And, they were all over the place. So
it wasn't like Dante's Inferno or anything.
No, no, it wasn't. And I'm sure if people were to read them now, they'd be looking for better poetry, but that's okay.
Do you have any of those left still from?
Oh yes, I still have that. I still save all of those things.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay,
there are quite a select few that I really do like, and that actually I've written a post using one of them as the theme for it. So I liked it well enough in order to put it out there again.
So that got you up to your college years. What did you do after that?
Well, I had a strong church background, and I was actually pre-enrolled in seminary, which
really what religion?
It's the Reformed Church of America.
Wow.
If you think of it, it's really the German version of the Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
Same kind of thing out of the Reformation. And I think my senior year, I was pretty gung-ho about it. And I had to go through a whole series of steps with leaderships of the local church and the bigger church. And they all said, yes, fine, we're going to support you financially as well as spiritually. And so I went to college with that idea that I would go on to seminary afterward. And during my college experience, which was pretty wild because the Vietnam War was on.
Oh, gosh.
And my draft number was low enough in order to be drafted if I didn't do well in school. You would think that would have given me plenty of incentive to do really well in school, but my first semester I was on academic probation. So I had to get my act together in order to avoid going to the war. But so many things happened. I got involved in a lot of religious studies and yoga and all kinds of other things, spent a lot of time out in nature, and decided I can't buy all of the things that go along with the church doctrine. So I released myself from that, graduated, got a job. One of the jobs was a part-time teller at a bank. And I went full-time because there was no way part-time was going to cover my wife's and my expenses. And I spent 25 years in banking, started as a teller, and I ended up as a vice president in charge of 20 branches. And
wow,
all the things that went on in those branches. And I left there because the nature of the banking industry had shifted from being customer service and staff development to being purely sales. And that's not
trying to get accounts. Yeah.
Yep. They didn't care whether they kept them. They just wanted to get them. And they didn't provide any backup service. And that wasn't what my career was all about. So I said, I'm going to look for something mission-based. So I left there and I spent 13 years with Catholic Charities and their disability services. And that was very rewarding because the end product of all of our efforts was helping folks who have disabilities who need tons of support. That some of them lived in houses that we ran, some of them were out in the community, but they needed services coordinated and provided. So being the financial arm behind that to make all that happen was really richly rewarding.
Yeah, I was going to say very rewarding. Well, you and I didn't talk about that, but that's clearly using your time and your talents to make the world a better place, which is my criteria for this podcast.
Yeah, I think that the natural fit was that in my banking career, my focus was on customers, because many of the customers throughout the branch career that I had were folks that did not know how to manage their finances at all. A lot of them were widows. The husband did everything for the finances, and the wife was like totally unable to really provide for herself. And so the bank really did a great job on trying to help folks out like that, get mortgages and, get loans and all the kinds of things.
Was this like a community local bank, or were you with one of the biggies?
It was a New York State bank, one of the oldest in the state, but headquartered in Albany.
Okay.
But because they went stock and then got purchased by someone else, that brought in the whole mentality of sales as the primary.
The numbers. You got to live by the numbers, right?
Exactly.
That's like so many business. I mean, the healthcare industry, everything is that now. The food industry. I mean, isn't it crazy just how things shift?
It's very challenging. Yep.
Yes, it is, especially for those who are awake, to see it and see what's really happening.
Exactly.
Okay, so you did the charities, and then when are you retired now? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I retired in the end of 2013, and then started my best career ever, which was assisting my wife in taking care of our 2 local grandchildren.
Oh, yes.
So the idea was that we would be the primary, so that our daughter and her husband could work full time.
Yeah.
And so we took over all of that. And I had decided early on that my granddaughter and I would really get involved in anything that she found interesting. So I decided I'd buy a big activity book, and we would open it up whenever it is that we were feeling a little bored, and we'd stick our finger somewhere and we'd go buy the materials, and then we'd make whatever it was.
Wow.
That stuck on. So I have a journal that she has that has all the activities that we've done since she was 3 years old, and she's 12 now.
Wow. So for 9 years.
So this has like 250 pages in it of all the activities and the art projects and the cooking and the places that we've been. So she has that, and my grandson has his, and my non-local granddaughter has hers. So that, I think, is a tremendous legacy for them to be able to keep that.
Oh, it is. And what great grandparents to be able to dedicate so much of your lives to them. That's wonderful. Hey, I want to go back. When you were in your corporate work, and were you getting any messages from, spirit, and were you writing any of this? When did your messages start? Let's tell the audience why you're even on this podcast, like what we were talking about. So
it covers a pretty wide range. I know one of the things we were talking about was that I have had a very long-term and very intimate relationship with God. I treasure the fact that people use different names, and that those are all meaningful to those individuals.
Wait, do you mean like source, universe?
Sure, source and
names?
the divine, and
Okay.
there's such a host of names that people use. The infinite, the universe,
Right.
all sort of hinting at the exact same essence.
Yeah.
That I feel as though my relationship offers me a degree of courage to express what it is that I receive. So one of the things you and I had been talking about was that I receive messages from beyond, from those who have passed over. And I felt as though I had to deliver the message. And often the person had no idea that a message was coming.
Right.
So it takes a certain amount of courage to be able to approach someone and to be able to deliver the message that's meant for them.
Well, especially a stranger, right? You're speaking primarily of strangers.
Well, these are co-workers, which makes it even trickier because, I don't know what kind of response I'm going to get.
Yeah, or what they're going to think about you at the level of your
exactly.
job.
Yep. And whether or not any of it's actually relevant to them. Part of what I receive as a message, though, does say to me, this is a real event. Whether you have no way of knowing this, I'm telling you, this is what's happened. So when I approach the person, there is something for them to be able to hold on to and say, yes, I know that. And there's no way you would know that.
Right.
So
we call that evidence. That's like evidence.
So I've had a number of those instances. And I think there is one fundamental thing that is a part of my life that guides me differently than anyone else that I've run across, and that is that I actually have memories of what it's like to be in heaven.
Oh, really? That's special.
I remember part of the sense of being there and a ceremony where I was sent from there to here.
Wow. Hey, I know my listeners would be really curious to learn. Can you talk a little bit about that? Are you able to recollect, to give us some insight on what your recollection is? Because I'm sure that maybe somebody out there has had a thought, but maybe they just thought they were imagining it. And if it's similar, it might be,
Sure. I think one of the things that's curious about it is that we have so much of a culture that talks about this life, and now there's this evolving culture that's really talking a lot about the afterlife. And this is my book, The Before Life.
Is that the title of it?
No, it's just how I refer to it. I think it's this grand circle, because the before life, then the earth life, then the afterlife, and you're right back to the before
life.
Right. So yes, I have this distinct feeling. It's not a visual, although there are some visuals. I can't describe it because there's nothing here on earth that resembles it. So none of the descriptive words I could use really would offer an insight. What it's more about is how it felt, which is a divine sense of bliss. There is this feeling that everything is completely the way that it should be. I don't like the word "should," but it is
like it's meant to be.
It is just a sense of utter bliss, and part of my struggle with being here and having that sense is, what's the point of being here if the ultimate is to be there in this state of bliss? And the answer that I've received countless times is that you can't experience, that you come to earth in order to experience what you know there. So earth is a process of evolving and for me, revelation. So that's
what I've always heard, like from the people that I listen to. That's exactly what they say, that we are here in this earth. Gary Zukav calls it the earth school. It's our earth school where we learn and grow and evolve. And then we go back and then we come back again and learn either new lessons or the same ones we didn't learn the first time.
And I have a slightly different twist on it from school. And maybe it's really just my own upbringing that's shifted this for me. But school and lessons seems to suggest a pass fail. You either get it or you don't get it. And it also has grading as part of it when you talk about
like judgment. School. Yeah,
exactly. And so to avoid that, it really seems to me is these are chosen lessons. What was revealed to me was that we have a spiritual blueprint. and that this blueprint is something that we chose in heaven to come here to experience the blueprint, but that we have absolute control over it. We can modify and change any of the elements that we want to. Nothing is set in stone because of our free will.
Yeah.
And since that's a sacred gift that we have, we're always able to adjust any of those things, and through the revelation of what we experience, make different choices.
Right. Even like for people who've experienced trauma and really horrible things, like it's so hard for people to understand how they would have chosen to come to this earth to experience that. But when you realize that they could have had 300 lives before, it's like, okay, I know I'm coming back to this. Let's go see what that's like. It's hard for people to understand that they would choose that.
Yeah, it's the framework. I think that if we look at it from an earth perspective, it doesn't make any sense why anyone would choose to experience such a harsh, challenging, or horrific life.
Right.
That's our earth view of it. From a spiritual dimension, we don't make decisions in the same way. So part of it is that you can experience whatever it is that you choose. I also believe that not only are you able to live new lives, it's not a linear, so that you don't come back. Let's say if you were born in 1800, you don't come back next time in 1900, the next time at 2000. There's nothing necessarily linear about it. You could live a life in the 1800s and go back to 1500 and then go to 2500.
Wow. So, yeah, that's really hard for me to understand. I mean, I've heard my sister talks and things like that, but I'm not denying it. It's just like my brain has a hard time conceptualizing that, because I think I just want everything to be kind of like organized.
Yes.
Instead of sporadic. And so is any of your writings like the Talking with God, like the book that you wrote, do you have those kinds of information that gets communicated to you and that's where your understanding comes from? Or does your understanding come from some other level of insight? Like, where does this come from that the world, that our lives can be not linear?
Well, I think it's all that's part of what I came back with. My sense is that from my recollections of having been in heaven was that you have created for yourself a spiritual blueprint of what you want to experience. You leave heaven to come to earth, and you go through what has been referred to me as the great forgetting. There would be no point in having the awareness of heaven and bringing it here to earth, because then you can't experience the duality of earth. So what you do is you go through a great forgetting and you come here sort of as a baby, that they're kind of helpless and they don't seem to know anything unless you take the time to actually hold a child, a baby in your arms, and look into their eyes. You may see the light in there from where they just came from. But you go through the great forgetting, and then you're here on earth. And so you're experiencing things. For me, a lot of what I think is the awareness from heaven stayed with me. It wasn't forgotten, which made my life very unusual. I had a really hard time through most of my life because I didn't feel like I fit here.
Right.
One of the things that I would express about that is that as I would walk, it felt like my feet wouldn't touch the ground.
Wow. So you weren't really grounded that much, were you?
No, I owe a lot to my wife because she hangs on to my ankles and keeps me grounded. So she's really wonderful at being able to do that.
That's sweet. And you've been with her since your 20s? That's when y'all got married?
Well, when
did y'all meet?
We met in church. I was a sophomore and she was, I was a junior and she was a sophomore, and our first date was January 1st, 1971. So we've been together since then.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
I love good love stories like that. I mean, just I see that it stems a lot of times with the way that the man reveres his wife and in general, I mean, I'm making a generalization, but when the man has an admiration for his wife and a respect, it just seems to like work a lot better, the
It really does.
relationship. That to me is part of the key, is
Yes.
finding when you feel like you have something really great and then she continues to show up really great. That's
Yep.
kind of what the longevity, how it works.
Yeah, and I think the attachment that both of you have to a sense of compromise is an absolute key too, because no
Yeah.
one can have it their own way all the time.
Right.
Have to be able to compromise, and we've really been able to do that over the course of the time we've been together.
I know, successfully.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see, 70 to 20. I mean, that's like 30 plus 20. That's 50 years, right?
Yes,
That
it
just
is.
celebrated. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a wonderful. Okay, so I think through our conversation, the group kind of heard a little bit. We slipped and told kind of what you're up to now, but why don't you just start a little bit explaining to the audience what you do now as a writer, because you're retired and you're helping your grandkids, but at the same time, you're fully into writing. So let's
Yes.
talk about I want you to share the books that you wrote and how you got into really where you feel like your true purpose is. And I just wanted to mention something that while you were sharing about why you didn't have the total forgetting of where you came from, maybe it was your part of your purpose to share it with others, like to teach us, where we came from. So, because we did forget and we needed a messenger, to share. So you've kind of been chosen to be one of the many messengers out there. So let's tell everybody how you're a messenger and what messages you are bringing to this earth plane, right now. So I'll let you talk about the stuff you're up to nowadays.
Okay. The first thing I guess I'd like to mention is the website, which is messagesforinspiration.com. The reason I wanted to mention that first is because all of the books that I've written are listed there so that anybody who was interested in them can find them all there with a link to Amazon if they're truly interested in reading them.
Right. If they feel guided.
One of the other reasons I mention that is because I do 2 posts every Sunday and every Thursday. And the posts are 500 to 700 words. So they're not particularly long. Someone can easily read them in 2 or 3 minutes, which was the objective, to be able to offer some thoughts and ideas. So they're on topics ranging all over the place, offering yourself permission, letting yourself off the hook, finding the right path for you. Different things that I offer that are either part of my experience or just the questions that I ask that help someone to be able to look a little deeper and to explore a little bit more their own journey, and then to maybe ask themselves some questions so that they can uncover the truth for them, because that is largely what all of my writing is about, is offering ideas and thoughts and concepts so that folks can decide for themselves, does this or does this not suit me or connect to me or touch me in any way? So I think that the one series that I really adore is called the Little Buddha book. 1, 2, and 3, and 4 is written but not out there yet, but it's on its way. And one of the things that I'm blessed by is that my church adopts them and me, so that I have a book study group, and then we gather for 11 sessions and we talk. I read the chapter and everybody just kind of talks. I thought I would have to prepare a whole series of questions to get conversation started. I've only had to do that twice in 33 sessions. Mostly the people just take off and they identify with the characters so much that are in the story that they relate their own life to the character. And then they speak from that place. So I can witness firsthand that the characters do speak to more than just me, which is really kind of fascinating to me, that there's a broad enough appeal that other people get it too.
Right.
In one way, I'm not surprised by that, because I'm really just I'm listening as a writer. It's very hard to explain the writing process.
Yeah, tell everybody where your writing inspiration comes from.
Because really what ends up happening is the story is basically told to me. Not, it's not a dialogue. I don't hear voices. I just know what it is that's being said to me, like who's saying it, and what to write. Mm-hmm. And the stories are crafted so well without me having to keep track of every single detail. If I was really trying to do this on just me, right, I'd have to have a whole storyboard with all sorts of, assistive devices to be able to remember all of these things.
It's like writing the Lord of the Rings or something. You got to keep it all
would be
intact.
Terribly complicated and completely undoable. But because the characters live and speak through me, I'm just really doing the best I can to describe what it is that they're saying. And I'm really just loving the journey with them. So in a way, I don't feel like, I know that you kind of asked for me to describe myself, and I couldn't choose the word author, because that to me was the intellectual version of this. Writer seems to be more like the scribe, the person engaged in the process. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I see myself. So there's that series of books. And then there is the book you mentioned, Talking with God, which came out of my own personal experience. You and I both read Conversations with God, and I owe Neil Donald Walsh a huge debt of gratitude for him taking the time and putting himself out there in order to write that book.
So long ago. What was that like, in the early 2000s or not in the late 90s?
In 1997. Yeah,
late 90s.
The first book came out. Because I remember I went to one of the local bookstores, and I was looking at the bargain table, and I kept circling, and this book kept coming up. I could not walk by it. I had to pick it up. I put it back down. I went around. I had to come back and get it and take it home.
Wait, is that even before you ever had any kind of like messages from God? Or
no, it wasn't. But what it suggested to me was a different relationship through an intention to really kind of to find my own answers. So I took that book home and read it like nonstop until I was all the way through it. And I said, the fundamental benefit of this to me is I had to ask myself, if this works for Neil, it'll work for me. And so I took it on faith that was going to happen. I began my own intimate two-way conversations. And that has been an incredible evolutionary process, because my name for God and my relationship for God has changed 4 different times.
Wow.
Dramatically.
Wait, can you give us some insight? Like, what did it start out as? Just God?
It started out as kind of the traditional of what you'd expect from
like your Presbyterian background?
Yes, from a normal Christian background of father. Uh-huh. So God was father. And so I began calling it, it's really kind of funny, because I would write down what it was that I was saying and put R for Rob and then G for God there. And I thought, well, this is kind of dopey, but it helped me keep it straight. Uh-huh. And what ended up happening was that father as a term didn't feel right and evolved into Abba, which is a very different concept of a much more close relationship of father.
Yeah.
Not the, the high.
Is that Greek? Is Abba Greek? What is Abba? What language?
I am not sure about that.
Maybe it's, what's the Aramaic or something, the one that Jesus spoke?
It could be. I'm not certain. And what I found fascinating was that over the course of time, it evolved so that when I was having my conversations, it was a distinctly feminine response.
Wow.
The feel of it was very much a loving feminine energy. And it became obvious to me that this was a female, a feminine version of the God I only viewed from a male point of view.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And we all know that everything has male and female energy anyway.
So the female energy was Na'a, N-A', which is out of the Lakota Sioux, because I have a very strong Native American part to me. That evolved into a relationship with Jesus as Yeshua. That would be his Aramaic name. That evolved further into this kind of ethereal sort of connection, which I named and she accepted as Leah, L-I-A, which is love in action.
Okay, interesting.
So for the past, I would say maybe 10 years, Leah's been
It's stuck with Leah.
Pretty much the essence of my conversations. I now have 2 additional voices which haven't come to the forefront enough. I only know what their names are, but I don't have a relationship with them.
Wait, can we at least hear on Oneness Junkie podcast learn what the names are?
One is Essence, and the other is Zenith.
Okay.
And I'll let you know more once.
Well, they're both feminine, right?
Well, I don't think Essence is either.
Okay. Whoa.
And I have nothing to go on for Zenith other than that there was some brief thing that if you looked to the horizon, to the far horizon and upward, that is the Zenith. That is me.
Wow.
But other than that, I have nothing to go on.
That sounds like a star.
It does.
Yeah.
Very much like.
Yeah. That is so neat. Like, without anyone reading your book, like, is there anything that stands out from that book and that experience that just is the hook that you can just share? Like, this is what God said, and it surprised me and it surprised everyone. Like, I think it's surprising to hear that God, from your perspective and your experience with God, is like feminine, because that is different from what most people kind of portray. But it makes sense to me.
Sure.
Because feminine is love. And it's funny how synchronicities happen. I just want to throw this in as a conversation piece for sharing, to contribute. A friend who identifies as homosexual sent something on Facebook about a homosexual man who adopted a Cambodia boy and raised him. And then the Cambodia boy became an Olympian. And, he was sick and dying, the little boy, the Cambodian boy was, but this homosexual man raised him. And normally the kind of spin on the story was like, normally there's a concept that, a single homosexual man isn't, I'm just quoting like with my fingers, isn't capable of providing like the kind of attention and nurturance that a young child would need. That's like the expectation. But this was proven differently, that this love superseded any stereotypes or, and when I was like in tears, I'm feeling emotional right now. I was in tears reading this story, and the young man went to UT, University of Texas in Austin, and he was, Olympian from that. And I just thought that's so beautiful, because that is like the full expression of God, love. And I thought to myself, this is love in action.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so when I read that, that's exactly, I read that today. Here you are telling me on this podcast episode that God's ultimate name was Leah, love in action. And that resonates with everything that I felt today when I was reading that article. And so I just love how synchronicities like that happen in your life that are like confirmations. It's a confirmation in my own connection with God. And I shared it. A friend of mine, what my childhood friend who almost went to the Olympics for the USA. She was a NCAA diving champion for the University of Texas, the same university that this young boy, she did it 30 years ago, when we were young. He's doing it, I guess, now. The guy's, I guess, I don't know if he's a student still, but he was in the story. And so I texted it to her, and she comes from a traditional background, not this kind of conversation at all. Is probably not that comfortable for her. And so I was hoping that I could connect with her, showing her this article from the diver perspective. And like her response, was so beautiful, because even though we may not have similar beliefs, she could see the God love in this story. And I was so proud that we were able to connect. Like, even though we have different perspectives of maybe who God is, we found this one common thread that we could both agree that this story was love in action, and she was like, she just confirmed back with my text, like, absolutely God's love right here, showing. So anyway, that was neat, because you can't always, like, people you grow up with, you can't always, be on the same path and have similar belief systems, because we all have different journeys. But it feels good when I'm able to connect, even in our differences, with something like that, about like the basis of God, Yeah. So I love the fact that you shared that Leah, love in action, became like your word for God. So my question for you was there anything from that book that was stated that you could share with the listeners as like, wow, God said that, that kind of thing?
Well, I think all sorts of things have happened for me. The answers that I've been able to experience have radically shifted my life. What I wanted was a way to be able to provide for other folks a pathway so that they could engage in their own intimate personal relationship with however it is that they chose to name whoever they were in contact with, whether they chose the word God or whatever. So providing this book and this 40 people kind of beta group, they provided me with their input about what it is their experience was all along the way, the challenges that they faced. So it shaped the book so that anyone could pick up that book and read through it. They would hear my story, but they would be able to digest that with the idea of it being relevant to their own story. And then how do they transition then to their own relationship? Because that was the ultimate goal of this, was to provide some sort of a way for people who wanted it, but didn't know how to start it or to make it blossom. And I think the proof of it working is in the responses that I got from all of the people. If it had only been one or two people, if somebody was conducting a scientific clinical study and 2 people had success out of 40, they'd say, well, that was a total failure. But if they were conducting a scientific study and they said, okay, well, all 40 of these people experienced some level, higher or lower, of monumental connection, an answer that they'd been striving for without any success, I'm not the one providing the answer. That's not what this book is about. This book is about providing a method for you to get started and to experience your own answers. So I think that's, if there's a hook here, that's the hook, is that this actually works.
Right.
And,
in other words, like, it's going to work for the individual at the individual's level, right? It's not like a path that you have to follow. It's discovering your path. Right?
Exactly. Yep. And I think that it really boils down to a pretty simple formula, which is conceive, believe, and act. If you can't conceive of a thing, there's no point in discussing or thinking about it any further. But if you can conceive that a relationship with God is possible, then it becomes an issue of belief. Do you believe it? So those people who will not have any success are those people who come to the book and say, I'm gonna make sure that this book doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or there's no way this book can work, so I'm not gonna really even try.
Yeah, they just want to discount it or dispute it.
But if you come with an idea that yes, it's possible to have this. Yes, I believe that these other people truly did have these experiences, and I believe that is possible for me, then it's really just a case of acting on that belief. And I think that's how everything comes into being.
Yeah, that's awesome. So everybody go out there and find that book and find your own path, right? Find your own truths from it. Yeah. So that's wonderful. Well, gosh, the time has flown by. It's been 45 minutes since we started.
That's great.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? Are there any projects that you're working on or anything that you're just doing the website writing?
I'm doing the 2 posts, and then I'm doing the forward questions on Instagram to spark people into thinking about a variety of things that they may or may not. Takes like half a second to read the forward questions.
So tell everybody where your Instagram name is so they can find you.
I believe it's just Rob H. Geyer.
Yeah, I think it's at Rob.
Oh, yeah. I think the at is common for the Instagram. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's Geyer.
Correct.
Geyer. Yep. Yeah. And you said your website was inspirational
messages for inspiration.com.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have any workshops or any kind of thing that you've got coming up that people would want to know about?
Well, I don't. I think that for the people who are, fans of the Little Buddha book, they're waiting for 4 to be actually available. It's written. I just have to put it into the template and upload it. So that is, it's really kind of no one, I think, who hasn't written and published has any concept of how consuming a process that is. I remember the first book that I wrote. My children were 6 and 9 at the time. I didn't have a lot of time. My wife and I were super busy with them. So I had to write from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. for months to be able to produce the first book I wrote, which is Witness of the Heart. That's on the website too. But it's an enormous level of commitment to be a writer with something to say and wanting so much within you to be able to produce this and share it.
Especially if you're feeling urged to share it and you're like, I don't have time, give me time. I need some time.
That is the one thing that I have realized is that time is stretchable. As a concept, it doesn't make any sense because time is supposed to be, it's the same today, tomorrow, 1 second is 1 second. But I think you have the capacity to believe alternate things are possible. And I believe time is able to be stretched because from the point that I retired, if I look at it from, 2014 to now, to have, I'm a caretaker for my mom who's 98 now. And, my grandchildren and my wife and I do things and that. So I have a busy schedule, but I've still produced 7 books and a play. So I don't know how that's possible. If I'd sat down and said, you have to do 7 books and a play over the next 8 years, just do it. I would say you're out of your mind. There's no way possible that I can do that. And yet that's the product.
That's like one every year almost.
It is. I think everyone is capable of doing far more than what it is that they think they're capable of doing. And that's a lot of why I write what I write. Is because I want people to live their most beautiful, most radiant life possible, and to not be taken over by the world or culture and fall into the trap of thinking that they're limited. We are not limited. We are limitless beings, and
do
that's
you
a message.
wish that you would have done anything differently with your career? Like you said, 25 years in baking and then 13 years as the financial structure for the charities.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't
Okay.
change. I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't be exactly who I am right now if I hadn't had those exact experiences.
Right. Yeah.
And if I want something different, then I choose it now.
Right. And you have the power to create it, right?
Yes.
So that's
And
good.
if
Yeah,
not now, next time.
I just finished the book, the new book by Gary Zukav called The Universal Human. Have you heard of it?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Have you looked into it at all?
Haven't looked into that yet.
Have you ever read his other book, The Seed of the Soul?
Yeah, Seed of the Soul. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that book. That's like what I call my Bible. And this book is like an extension of that at a deeper, heavier. I mean, he talks about COVID and what's COVID's doing for the consciousness and, shifting into the 5D. And, it's really great because for those of us who have some insight to that, it's confirmation, for our awareness. So anyway,
I'll have to check that out.
Oh yeah. I got it on Audible because I wanted to be busy while I was listening to it. So I listened to it through Audible, but it's got like 60 chapters.
Wow.
Or 70 or something. It's a lot. It was like chapter 70. I'm like, what? He writes 70 chapters in a book.
Clearly has a lot to say.
Well, and he wrote it during COVID. This is a new expression, so it's really, in fact, I didn't tell you this, but I emailed him and asked him if he would be a guest on
Well, I hope he says yes for you.
I hope so too. That would be a fun conversation. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up, and I have this thing. If you listen to any of my podcast episodes, I have this thing that I do. It's called Mirror Reflections, and you do not have to say anything. It's just a time to open yourself up and receive. I call it Mirror Reflections because it's like me reflecting back to you who you are in the world. And I don't know you very well, but I can glean these things just from being with you in the 2 times we talked, one time on the phone, meet each other for the first time, and then today. So I just want to share that I'm so grateful, Rob, that you came on to the show. I hope that anyone who's hearing your message and resonates with it finds you out there to connect with you. I believe and think that you are a wonderful light in the world. You are clearly gifted and special. You have a special purpose. I mean, obviously we all do, but yours is extra special in the sense that a lot of us haven't fully realized, our true connection with source at the level where we can write, messages so others can glean from it. That's a really special task that you've been given, and you're stepping up to the challenge, and you're doing it and have been for a long time. So we thank you all for, your writings and your dedication to putting it out there on the internet so other people can find it. And so that they can, your big intention is so that they can find their truth. And so just honoring you, for the role that you're playing in humanity at this time. And I'm so glad that I got a chance to highlight you on the Oneness Junkie podcast and, the work that you're doing. And I wish you all the best regarding, I know your heart really wants to get the message out. And so one of the biggest challenges of having something to say is how do I get this to the people? So I really just bestow on you, hopefully great marketing opportunities come your way so that you can get this very important message out to those who are seeking answers. And I know, you have something to share with them, from the divine, from Leah. Yeah. And I just really appreciate you for who you are in the world at this time, in this particular moment in time. So thank you so much for the gift that you are to the world.
It's been a real honor and privilege to be with you, Lydia, and I appreciate you giving me this chance to have a bigger voice.
Yes, and I love the fact that podcast a global exposure being on the internet. And, you'll be on Apple Podcast and Amazon and Spotify. If everybody else is jumping off of Spotify, who cares? We're on there. So maybe people, so maybe they'll come find this great message, we're not going anywhere, Spotify. So anyway, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Lydia.
You're welcome. And anytime that you have, an inspiration or a message or whatever, you're welcome to share it, and we can possibly have other conversations when you have things that you need to share. So we're going to say, good. Do you have anything final to say before we say goodbye?
Just want to say that I think you are a real treasure, and I appreciate you doing what you're doing, stepping up and being out there yourself is really wonderful.
It feels, I was in corporate America for basically 30 years, and I feel like I'm finally doing the work that, like, your work is the writings. My work is getting the messages out. Like, I'm a communicator, like that is my thing. Yes. I went to college. I got a degree in public speaking. Who gets a degree in that? And what do you do with it? It was just easy for me. And I did well at it. And I didn't ever know how to really utilize it. But what I love is people, and I love connection. And so this is really easy for me, like meeting a stranger and having an in-depth, intimate conversation with a stranger is easy for me. And I know that's not easy for a lot of people, but that means that this work that I'm doing is my work to do. And it feels so good to be able to have the opportunity right now to find people like you and then highlight them and share them with the world. That, like, supporting that feels so great. It's better than supporting a pharmaceutical company like I used to.
Exactly.
This feels so much better. It doesn't pay the same or at all, but it doesn't matter.
Up until now, who knows what the future holds for you?
God is my source. So that's just all I really care about, is doing God's work and letting love be in action. Right. It's going to be my mantra too. Right. So just love in action. That's what we're both doing. So finding more connection with each other and then bringing others into our connection is really what the purpose of this is. So thank you so much. So hang on there. Thank you. Appreciate you. And we'll see you soon. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye. We've reached the end of this episode. If you'd like to continue with this inspirational journey, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. If you are a self-proclaimed oneness junkie, get yourself a t-shirt and spread the message of oneness in your community. And finally, if you have a story to share or know someone that should be a guest on this podcast, contact us at onenessjunkie.com. See you next time. And remember, when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Compassion starts with you and me.